My fiancée put sleeping pills in my tea the night before the prenup signing. Said I seemed tense. I woke up 6 hours late, covered in sweat. Missed the meeting. Her lawyer tried to claim I'd refused. I sent the tea bag to a lab, then sent her father the results, along with my lawyer's card. The wedding was 3 weeks away when Pamela suggested we finally tackle the prenuptial agreement her family had been pushing since our engagement announcement 6 months earlier. I owned a successful tech consulting firm worth approximately $2 million, specializing in cybersecurity solutions for Fortune 500 companies, while she worked part-time managing social media accounts for her father's expanding real estate empire. The disparity in our financial situations had never bothered me, but her father, a prominent attorney in the city with political connections reaching into the state capitol, insisted on protecting what he called generational wealth preservation. Tuesday evening arrived with an unusual domestic scene that should have raised immediate red flags. Pamela was brewing my favorite chamomile tea, something she had done perhaps 3 times in our entire 2-year relationship despite knowing my nightly routine of drinking herbal tea while reviewing business reports. The prenup meeting was scheduled for 9 sharp the following morning at the downtown offices of Morrison, Blake & Associates, the most prestigious family law firm in the state, and I had spent the previous 3 weeks reviewing documents with my lawyer David, preparing for what should have been a straightforward discussion about asset protection, future earnings, and inheritance rights. Pamela seemed unusually attentive that evening, asking repeatedly if I felt stressed about the meeting, whether I had reviewed all the clauses properly, and suggesting multiple times that I needed to relax and clear my mind before such an important legal proceeding. She kept mentioning how her father had stressed the importance of being mentally sharp during contract negotiations, which struck me as oddly specific advice coming from someone who typically showed little interest in business matters. The tea tasted distinctly different from my usual chamomile blend, carrying a bitter undertone that lingered unpleasantly on my tongue despite the floral aroma that initially seemed normal. When I mentioned the unusual taste, Pamela laughed with what I now recognize was nervous energy and explained that she had added honey from a new jar her mother had brought back from some organic farmer's market in the mountains. The explanation seemed reasonable enough at the time, though something about her fidgeting hands and the way she avoided direct eye contact while speaking struck me as uncharacteristic behavior. Throughout the evening, Pamela displayed nervous habits I had rarely observed during our relationship. She kept checking her phone every few minutes, glancing at the antique grandfather clock in our living room, and asking if I felt tired or if the tea was helping me relax. Her questions felt scripted, as if she was following some predetermined checklist of conversation topics designed to gauge my physical and mental state. By 10:30, an overwhelming drowsiness began washing over me in waves, despite having consumed 2 large cups of coffee after dinner while reviewing the final pages of the prenup documentation. The sensation was unlike normal tiredness. It felt as though my consciousness was being pulled underwater by an invisible current I could not resist. My eyelids became impossibly heavy. My thoughts grew increasingly fuzzy around the edges, and my speech began slurring slightly when I tried to discuss last-minute concerns about the asset division clauses. Pamela encouraged me to go to bed early, insisting that I needed to be completely sharp and alert for the meeting with both sets of lawyers, her father's legal team, and the mediator who would be overseeing the signing process. She helped me up the stairs to our bedroom, something she had never done before, and tucked me into bed with an unusual level of care and attention. The last coherent memory I retained was her kissing my forehead and whispering something about everything working out perfectly according to plan, though at the time I assumed she was simply referring to our wedding arrangements. As I drifted into unconsciousness, fragmented thoughts about the prenup terms floated through my mind. The agreement was relatively standard, protecting my existing business assets while ensuring Pamela would receive fair compensation in case of divorce. Her father had pushed for more aggressive terms initially, but my lawyer had successfully negotiated most of his demands down to reasonable levels. The final version seemed balanced and fair to both parties, which made me wonder why Pamela had seemed so anxious about the signing process. Brilliant sunlight streaming through the bedroom windows jolted me awake at 3:15 in the afternoon, accompanied by the distant sound of construction work from the development project across the street. My mouth felt like it had been stuffed with cotton balls, my head pounded with the intensity of the worst hangover I could remember experiencing, and my entire body was drenched in perspiration despite the air conditioning system running at its usual 68-degree setting. The digital clock on the nightstand confirmed my worst nightmare. I had slept through the most important legal meeting of my life by more than 6 hours. Panic set in immediately as I realized the magnitude of what had happened. The prenup signing was not just a formality. It was the final legal hurdle before our wedding, and missing it would create complications that could ripple through every aspect of our marriage plans. Vendors had been paid, guests had made travel arrangements, and the venue had been booked for months. Pamela was nowhere to be found in the house, and her silver BMW was conspicuously absent from our driveway. Her absence felt deliberate rather than coincidental, especially given that she knew how important this meeting was to both of our futures. I stumbled downstairs on unsteady legs, my coordination still impaired by whatever had caused such profound unconsciousness, and began searching for any clues about where she might have gone. My phone showed 17 missed calls from David, my lawyer, along with multiple text messages that painted an increasingly disturbing picture of what had transpired in the conference room. The earliest messages asked simply where I was and whether I was running late. The middle messages expressed concern about my absence and asked if I had encountered some emergency. The most recent message, sent at noon, delivered devastating news. Pamela's legal team had claimed I had deliberately missed the meeting as a way of refusing to sign the prenup agreement. David's voicemail messages, which I listened to with growing horror, revealed the full scope of what had occurred in my absence. Pamela had arrived at Morrison, Blake & Associates with her father and 2 additional attorneys I had never heard of, expressing what appeared to be genuine surprise and disappointment that I had failed to appear for such a crucial meeting. Her father had reportedly suggested that my absence indicated serious cold feet about the marriage itself, and he had recommended postponing the wedding indefinitely until we could resolve what he termed fundamental trust issues between us. According to David's account, Pamela had played the role of concerned fiancée perfectly, explaining to the assembled lawyers that I had been extremely anxious about the prenup terms and had expressed private doubts about whether marriage was the right decision. She claimed I had been losing sleep over the financial implications of the agreement and had made several comments about feeling trapped by the legal obligations we were about to undertake. The most damaging part of her performance, as David described it, was her suggestion that I might need professional counseling before we could proceed with either the prenup or the wedding. Her father had seized on this opening to propose a complete restructuring of our agreement, arguing that my unreliability and apparent commitment issues warranted additional protective measures for his daughter's financial security. When Pamela finally returned home around 5 o'clock, she was carrying shopping bags from expensive boutiques downtown, as if she had spent the day casually browsing while I dealt with the aftermath of missing the most important meeting of our relationship. Her explanation for my condition felt rehearsed and hollow, delivered with the kind of practiced sincerity that suggested extensive preparation. According to her version of events, she had tried repeatedly to wake me that morning, starting at 7:30 when she brought coffee to the bedroom. She claimed I had been completely unresponsive to her attempts to rouse me, even when she shook my shoulders vigorously and called my name at increasing volume. She described my breathing as unusually deep and my body as completely limp, leading her to assume I was coming down with some serious illness that required extended rest. Her decision to attend the meeting alone, she explained, was motivated by a desire to minimize embarrassment for both families and to provide a medical explanation for my absence that would preserve everyone's dignity. She expressed hurt and confusion that I would question her motives or suspect her of any deception, pointing out that she had nothing to gain from sabotaging a prenup that was designed to protect both of us. Despite her convincing performance, something in her eyes suggested she was concealing crucial information. Her body language revealed subtle signs of deception. She avoided sustained eye contact, touched her face frequently while speaking, and displayed nervous laughter at inappropriate moments during our conversation. These were behaviors I had learned to recognize during years of conducting business negotiations where detecting dishonesty was crucial to success. That evening, after Pamela had gone to bed claiming exhaustion from the stressful day, I retrieved the tea bag from the kitchen trash can where it had been buried beneath coffee grounds, fruit peels, and food scraps in what appeared to be a deliberate attempt at concealment. The careful way it had been hidden, rather than simply thrown away on top of other garbage, struck me as highly suspicious behavior from someone who claimed to have no knowledge of why I had slept so deeply. I sealed the tea bag in a clean plastic container and began researching private laboratories that could perform comprehensive toxicology analysis on herbal tea samples. My background in cybersecurity had taught me the importance of evidence preservation and proper documentation when investigating potential crimes, skills that proved invaluable as I began treating this situation as a formal investigation rather than a domestic misunderstanding. The lab technician I contacted on Wednesday morning explained that detecting foreign substances in tea required specialized testing procedures, but they could screen for common sedatives, sleep aids, and other drugs within 48 hours using advanced chromatography techniques. The cost would be $300, a small price to pay for either peace of mind or confirmation of my growing suspicions about what had transpired the night before the meeting. While waiting for the lab results, I began conducting my own investigation into Pamela's activities and her family's financial situation. Using the same research techniques I employed for corporate security assessments, I discovered several troubling facts about her father's law practice and their family's recent business dealings. Public records revealed that her father's firm had been involved in several high-profile divorce cases where wealthy clients had complained about aggressive tactics and questionable ethical practices. 2 formal complaints had been filed with the State Bar Association within the past year, though both had been dismissed due to insufficient evidence. The pattern suggested a legal practice that operated in gray areas of professional conduct. More disturbing was what I discovered about the family's financial condition. Despite their outward appearance of wealth and success, property records showed that her father had recently mortgaged his law office building and taken out substantial loans against his personal residence. The real estate company where Pamela worked part-time was facing foreclosure proceedings on several properties, and there were multiple liens filed against the business for unpaid debts. Meanwhile, I contacted David to reschedule the prenup signing, but Pamela's father had already begun a systematic campaign to undermine my reputation and credibility among our mutual friends, wedding vendors, and professional contacts. Several people called to ask if the wedding was still happening, expressing concern about rumors they had heard regarding my reliability and commitment to the relationship. Our wedding photographer left a voicemail asking whether they should proceed with engagement portrait sessions scheduled for the following week. The caterer expressed concern about food preparation timelines and requested confirmation about guest counts and menu selections. The florist wanted to know if they should continue with elaborate arrangements that required ordering specialty flowers from international suppliers. Pamela's behavior became increasingly erratic and defensive as the week progressed. She suggested we elope to Las Vegas instead of dealing with what she called unnecessary legal complications. And when I insisted on rescheduling the prenup meeting, she accused me of not trusting her family's good intentions. Her defensive reactions and repeated attempts to redirect conversations away from that Tuesday evening convinced me that my suspicions were completely justified. She began staying out late with friends, claiming she needed emotional support during this difficult time, and when she was home, she spent hours on phone calls with her father discussing what she described as damage control for our relationship. These conversations always stopped abruptly when I entered the room, and she would claim they were discussing wedding details or family matters that did not concern me. The laboratory called on Friday afternoon with results that confirmed my worst fears and validated every suspicion I had developed over the previous 3 days. The tea bag contained significant traces of zolpidem, commonly known by the brand name Ambien, in quantities sufficient to cause prolonged unconsciousness and next-day cognitive impairment in most adults. The technician explained that the bitter taste I had noticed was likely from crushed sleeping pills that had been poorly dissolved in honey or some other sweetener. The concentration was high enough to have caused the deep sleep I experienced, but not so high as to create obvious medical emergencies that would have required hospitalization. Whoever had administered the drug had calculated the dosage carefully to achieve specific results without causing obvious harm. Armed with the laboratory results and a digital recording device my lawyer had provided for documentation purposes, I confronted Pamela on Friday evening about the drug tea and her role in the elaborate deception that had derailed our prenup signing. I had spent hours preparing for this conversation, anticipating her likely denials and developing strategies for extracting the truth about what had really happened. Her initial response followed a predictable pattern of shocked denial, hurt feelings, and accusations that I was being paranoid and destructive to our relationship. She claimed to be devastated that I would suspect her of such horrible behavior and suggested that I seek professional help for what she described as conspiracy theories and trust issues that were threatening our future together. However, when I presented the toxicology report with its unambiguous evidence of pharmaceutical manipulation, her carefully constructed facade began crumbling immediately. The scientific documentation was impossible to explain away or dismiss as coincidence, and her denials became increasingly desperate and contradictory as she realized the gravity of her situation. Through tears that appeared more frustrated than genuinely remorseful, Pamela eventually admitted that her father had suggested ensuring I would miss the meeting to create grounds for renegotiating the prenup terms in their favor. The confession revealed a level of premeditation and family coordination that shocked me despite my growing suspicions about their motives and methods. The full scope of their scheme became clear as Pamela provided details about planning sessions that had occurred over several weeks leading up to the scheduled signing. Her father had discovered, through contacts in the business community, that my cybersecurity firm was worth significantly more than the $2 million I had disclosed in the initial prenup discussions. A pending acquisition deal with a multinational corporation, which I had kept confidential until after the wedding for competitive reasons, would potentially increase the company's value to $8 or $10 million. By making me appear unreliable, uncommitted, and potentially mentally unstable, they hoped to pressure me into accepting revised prenup terms that would give Pamela claim to a much larger portion of my assets in case of divorce. Her father had calculated that my desperation to salvage the wedding and avoid public embarrassment would make me willing to sign almost any agreement they presented. Pamela revealed additional disturbing details about their preparation and planning. Her father had obtained the sleeping pills from a client who was a physician, specifically requesting a drug that would cause prolonged sleep without obvious medical side effects. They had tested the dosage on her younger brother the previous weekend, giving him a smaller amount to ensure it would work effectively without causing dangerous reactions. The level of criminal coordination involved in their scheme was staggering, and I realized that the woman I had planned to marry had been willing to drug me, destroy my professional reputation, and manipulate our entire relationship to serve her family's desperate financial interests. The betrayal went far beyond simple greed. It represented a complete absence of love, respect, or basic human decency. When I threatened to involve law enforcement and pursue criminal charges for assault, drug administration, and conspiracy, Pamela shifted into bargaining mode, begging me to consider the devastating impact a criminal investigation would have on her father's legal practice and their family's standing in the community. She offered to call off the wedding immediately and leave me alone permanently if I agreed not to press charges or pursue civil remedies. However, I had already decided that her father needed to face serious consequences for orchestrating such an elaborate criminal conspiracy against someone who had trusted their family completely. The scheme had required extensive planning, criminal acquisition of controlled substances, and coordination among multiple family members to execute successfully. I contacted David that evening and instructed him to prepare a comprehensive legal report documenting the drugging incident, the laboratory results, Pamela's recorded confession, and all evidence of the family's financial desperation that had motivated their criminal behavior. The documentation would be essential for both criminal prosecution and civil litigation against everyone involved in the conspiracy. The next morning, I personally delivered copies of David's report to her father's law office, along with David's business card and a formal letter explaining that we would be pursuing both criminal charges and civil remedies for what had occurred. The receptionist's shocked expression when she read the documents suggested that this was not the first time the firm had faced serious legal challenges. Within hours of receiving the documentation, Pamela's father called David's office requesting an emergency meeting to discuss what he termed a misunderstanding that could be resolved through negotiation. His immediate willingness to negotiate, rather than deny the allegations, confirmed that our evidence was overwhelming and that he understood the serious legal jeopardy he faced. The criminal investigation that followed consumed the next 8 months of my life, but watching Pamela's father face justice made every court appearance worthwhile. Detective investigations revealed that he had been using similar drugging and manipulation tactics against at least 6 other wealthy clients and their family members over the previous 4 years, transforming what I thought was an isolated incident into evidence of a systematic criminal enterprise operating within his law practice. His disbarment hearing became a media spectacle that I attended every day, watching as witness after witness testified about suspicious circumstances surrounding failed negotiations, missed meetings, and unexplained illnesses that had benefited his clients at crucial moments. The State Bar Association revoked his license permanently, and he ultimately received a 7-year prison sentence for multiple felony charges, including conspiracy, assault, practicing law while engaging in criminal conduct, and racketeering. Pamela disappeared from my life completely after fleeing to live with relatives in Oregon, though I heard through mutual acquaintances that she had changed her name and worked various service jobs while struggling with the shame of her family's criminal exposure. She never attempted to contact me again, which suited me perfectly since I wanted no reminders of how thoroughly I had been deceived by someone I had planned to spend my life with. My cybersecurity business acquisition proceeded smoothly once the legal complications were resolved, ultimately closing at $14 million rather than the original $2 million estimate, thanks to additional contracts I secured during the investigation period. The experience taught me valuable lessons about due diligence that I applied not only to business relationships, but to every aspect of my personal life going forward. I implemented comprehensive personal security measures, including background checks for household staff, security cameras throughout my properties, and a strict policy of never consuming food or beverages prepared by anyone I had not known for years. These precautions might seem excessive to some people, but after experiencing firsthand how easily someone can be victimized by those they trust most, I prefer caution over vulnerability. 3 years later, I married Sarah, a fellow entrepreneur I met through a professional cybersecurity conference, but only after conducting extensive background research on her and her family that would have impressed any private investigator. Our relationship developed slowly and transparently, with both of us maintaining separate legal representation throughout our courtship and eventual prenup negotiations. The case became a landmark example used in legal ethics courses at universities across the country, illustrating the catastrophic consequences that await attorneys who prioritize financial gain over professional responsibility and client welfare. Law students still study the transcripts of Pamela's father's disbarment hearing as a cautionary tale about how quickly a successful legal career can be destroyed by criminal behavior. Looking back now, I recognize that the drugging incident, while traumatic at the time, ultimately saved me from a marriage that would have been built on deception and financial manipulation. The experience made me a more cautious person, but also a more successful businessman who understands the importance of verifying trust rather than simply extending it blindly to those who claim to care about my well-being. And that's the story. If you're still here, that means you're one of us. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button. I drop new chaos every single day, and trust me, tomorrow's story, it's even worse than this one.